There's me. Okay, hopefully that's all recorded. It's not going to go on going anywhere viral, I wouldn't have thought. So, but hopefully you've got nothing to worry about. Let's get started. So I want to share my screen. Let me just share the screen and we can get started. Alice Pearson. Oh, cool. Alice has gone and come back. Brilliant. Okay, hopefully you can see. Yeah, Claire, can you see that okay?
I certainly can, yes.
You can? Good, brilliant. Okay, let's get moving. So we'll get stuck straight into things. What we're looking to do today is slightly different in a sort of webinar format, really. Rather than listening to someone talk to you from the safety of looking behind their PowerPoint slides, we're going to be trying to be up and down on the PowerPoint slides, and it's going to be a kind of interview format. So I'm going to be asking questions, and the questions I've kind of gathered through my clients, and I'll be asking questions of Claire, and Claire is kind of in a hot seat as to giving us some answers or guidelines and hints and tips. So feel free to interject. You can either speak up via the audio facilities on Zoom. It's not a problem. Or you can put things in the chat. I'll be looking at the monitoring the chat. So any questions we got for Claire coming through, then we'll certainly ask you those. So it's as much participation as you want. We're not going to run through a script that's there and then I have questions at the end. So it's free flowing format of an interview kind of style. So hopefully we'll see how that works. One thing we'd like to sort of kick off with really is interesting to hear a lot about change and how things have changed. So it's kind of a little, I know Action Coach brought out a BC and AC, so before coronavirus and after coronavirus. But it's interesting that things have always been changing. And when people say, oh, I want to get back to normal, well, what was normal or what is normal? Whatever was normal is not going to be normal anymore because it's certainly changed. So people we want to have that growth mindset, really. It's not necessarily you're going to be building a massive business and we're going to be all be millionaires. It's just how good can you be? Can you be as good as you can? How good can you be? And can you be as good as you can be? Rather than comparing it with anyone else, again, against a closed mindset of, well, you can't tell me anything, I'm going to stay where I am, really. So in a sort of follow through with that botanical theme, really, people are, trees don't get to a certain height and say, right, that's it, I'm not growing anymore. They can't do that. They're either growing or you're dying. So we want our businesses to be moving forward and growing. So hopefully that makes sense. There's only one failure in the session this afternoon, and the failure is not to participate. So we're looking for 100% participation. If you're sitting there looking out the window, looking at any bluebells or whatever you're growing in your garden, that may be very good, but you're probably not going to learn as much as you probably could. So hopefully you'll be a full participation. Just to make a point on this, this is a runway, and it's the runway at Telluride, a ski resort in America. And if the reason I always use this one is, do we want our pilot to be fully participating at the point of takeoff? And the answer is probably yes. Does anyone know how fast the plane needs to get to before it takes off? Does anyone know? If you want to shout out, anyone know, or pop in the chat box?
No clue.
How fast, Claire? Fast?
No clue. No clue.
No clue. Anyone got an idea?
120.
300 miles an hour.
120. So what's the other one? I didn't hear that.
300.
300. Oh, that's quick. Yeah, that's quick. I think it's 100, about 180. So you need to be 180 miles an hour before you take off. So we want our pilot to be traveling at least 180 mile an hour to go into that. Otherwise, they might be heading straight for those mountains. So that's not going to be very helpful. So with that in mind, I'd just like to ask, are you prepared to participate this afternoon, 100%. If you can see a little show of hands, I can see all your hands going up or not going up. Jason, I've seen you. Yeah, Mark and Paul, you've been here before, so it's good. Brilliant. Thank you for that.
Yes, mate.
Yeah, good. Okay, cool. So let's get moving then. So for those that know this, please don't shout out, but this is a line, and it's a line of choice. And this in our action coach framework is a really key fundamental mindset slide that we talk about on a regular basis. So really you can choose in the morning whether you want to be below that line in your mindset or above the line. And certainly if you are below that line, you're looking at these three areas really. Blame, so you're looking at blaming other people, making excuses, and perhaps living in denial. It's going down there. I think probably if you're sort of looking at severity, you're looking at excuses probably first. I think a good one would be, well, why were you late? Why didn't you do your homework? What was it went wrong? Or I ran out of time, or the dog ate my homework, or whatever it is. So you're making some kind of excuse, but it's purely down to you. So you've made an excuse. Interestingly, the next level up, if you like, is the blame part. And when you're blaming, you're blaming someone else. So you're getting someone else involved in that culture of yours, that kind of blame culture. And if someone knows that you're always going to be dibbing him in, it's going to destroy the trust and rapport that you've built with people. So if you're looking to blame people, we're not interested in that. We're certainly not interested in any excuses. And probably the worst one is denial. So those people that are living in denial are not willing to admit their errors. So they're kind of living in denial. So hopefully that makes sense. What we're looking to do is be above that line. So we want people to be responsible, accountable, and to take ownership for their actions. So in that front, below the line really is reasons why things tend not to happen versus results. So you will get things happening when people are responsible for their actions. We don't, as human beings, we don't fly south for the winter. Yeah, we are always here. We don't swim upstream like fish, so we don't do that either. So we're responsible and accountable for our actions. So that's going to give us results. And really, we're looking at, we want to be engaging and being around positive, upbeat people that are going to give us energy or keep our energy, rather than people that are sucking and draining our energy. And everyone's met those sort of people that are going to spiral down and they're sucking the life out of you, really. So we want positive people rather than negative people, certainly working in our businesses. Hopefully that makes sense. Could you, just as a way of kicking things off, could you put into the chat box a score between 10 and 1? So 10 would be, I've been this week, so it's Thursday today. So this week, it's completely how much you've been 10. So ownership, accountability, and responsible for that this whole week so far. And if you've been blaming other people, making excuses, and living in denial, you're a 0 or a 1. So if you could pop in the box, the chat box, a number. There's no right or wrong answers. I can't decide on it. It's what you're thinking in your mind. So if you could perhaps pop in there, so I'll read out some numbers. So we've got right, okay. Maria 9, brilliant. Claire 8, Paul 8, excellent. I think that's the highest I've ever seen you put, Paul. Well done. Mark 8, that's another good one. Claire, Bed 1. Alice 8, Jason 7, brilliant. Wayne 10, super. Thanks very much for that. Good stuff. So think on, where are you? Is that below the line behavior or above the line behavior? So we're thinking what we can do rather than what we can't do. So with that in mind, let's move into the next part of the presentation, the main part of the presentation really, and it's these 7 questions that we need to ask. So Claire and I met and we had a big chat about, well, what are my clients asking? What are the things that people are worried about in the marketplace? And we came up with 7 questions. Are they the total definitive questions? Probably not. But if we start with these, and we'll see how we get on, if that's okay with you. So we'll get moving. And the first question, Claire, is: have your employees bought in to returning to work? So are they really, as the picture shows, are they happy getting ready to get back to work and sharing the office and getting back to the work? Or if it's people that are actually sharing the office again, so they may have been working with no one in the office, they've been coming to the office on their own, are they really keen on people coming back into the office? So that is my question to you, Claire. If you can, if I can ask you to answer that, that would be fantastic.
You certainly can. So my perspective for the you know, attendees on the call is I work for Corona, so I work with lots of different types of businesses. And firstly, the first question the first point for this for me really is the word why. So why are they returning? Why do they need to buy in to coming back to work? Because it's been a really strange time, as we all know, for everybody. So it's actually looking at how you're going to communicate with the staff members about the need to return to work, yeah, and what that's going to look like, because it's going to be very, very, whatever way we look at it is very different to what it was, for sure. So that's the first part of it. And there needs to be a business case as to why you need them back in. Now that might sound very, very obvious, but you've got a lot of staff out there across all industries. We've got a lot of staff right now that have been furloughed, possibly for 18 months when it comes to the end. I've been working at home for a really, really long time. And there's a level of being comfortable with that right now. So your employees need to be bought into you, your business, and why you want them back into work. So that comes from how you've been communicating with them over that period of time. And actually, some of them might have some reservations about sharing office space. And again, it's just making sure that you've got a very, very clear-cut message, reason, business case as to why you want them back, because that's what's going to get their buy-in. And also, some of them might feel a bit anxious. Some of them might be a bit socially anxious right now. So it's actually some really important considerations about how you've made the workplace, I want to say user friendly, but you understand what I mean when I say the word user friendly. So there's quite a lot in that you need to kind of factor in, but really this comes from your vision, your why, and why they're so important back in the workplace. You will find that there will be some that are desperate to come back. You will find that there are some that are not that bothered, and you will find some that are like, actually no, not for me. And I was reading an article very, very recently actually that was shared with me, and interestingly enough, the younger generation, the singletons, were very, very keen to go back into the workplace because going to work represented so much more than just going to work. You found that the married people that were quite settled in their life, not that bothered either way, didn't mean a great deal to them, nice to see people, nice not. And then you found like some people that were the real high earners, you know, your London city trader types, actually preferred to be at home because their working days are quite long as it is. And for them being at home, stop them being on that city first training. So you've got to understand that the demographic of people that work for you and are in the workplace for sure are going to have different reasons for wanting to come back, not wanting to come back. And it's just how you're talking through with them about, you know, your business case for why they're coming back into the workplace.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Claire.
No problemo.
Lovely. So that's yeah. So it's that why, isn't it? Really. So that why do you want people back, and making sure you're looking after them to get that communication, really, isn't it? So next question then is so if someone's got people employees that are anxious to return to the office, what would be the sort of HR advice on that along those lines, please?
Firstly, just to let you all know that the majority, and I mean the vast majority of people, have got reservations and do feel a little bit anxious about it. So again, the best weapon I can give people in terms of words is why. So you need to understand why they feel anxious. Is that for their own well-being? Is that for a vulnerable family member well-being? Is that for their family's well-being? You've got to understand why they feel anxious first, because you have to be extremely careful with the word anxious, because that has a connotation to mental health, which is a medical disability, which is discriminatory at the nth degree. So you have to be really, really understanding of their reasons why. And then what you'd have to do is you'd have to, and again, consult with people individually, because this is not going to be a one size fits all. But if you're making the workplace secure for them, you've got to be able to evidence that. So what have you done around making it a safe place? Despite the fact that freedom is on its way, allegedly on the 19th of July, do I genuinely feel like we're going to walk back into a workplace 2020, February? I don't think that we will. And I still don't think people are going to have levels of confidence that that's going to be how it is. So you've got to make sure that what you've done in terms of your health and safety aspect for being COVID secure and making people feel comfortable to return is very easily evidenced, and people can see that. They can see you've made visible changes. They can see that you've made the reasonable adjustments so that they do feel less anxious to come back into the workplace. That's really quite important. And obviously the employee well-being factor as well comes in. And so these first two are kind of quite interlinked, but employee well-being is paramount right now. So lots of businesses are looking at different employee assistance programs. And if you're not familiar with an employee assistance program, it's almost a staff benefit that the company are providing. And that gives people access to counselling and support for all different types of things. We've seen a huge uptake in clients that we work with that now have that factored in. But it's definitely focused around why they're anxious, listening, understanding it, giving them the evidence to say, hey, look, we've done this. Your risk assessments are important. We'll probably cover a little bit more of health and safety in a little bit on it, but it doesn't start and stop with what you've done in regards to COVID. You've got to have some other considerations for your other health and safety documentation as well. But if people genuinely are anxious, there are things like the EAP programs out there now that businesses they're relatively inexpensive. They are what businesses are offering out to employees. And the main protection from a business perspective for that is it really makes it difficult for mental health claims to be upheld in a tribunal should you ever find yourself in that tricky situation, which I'm sure none of you will. But that's a really great thing to lean on for giving anxious staff support, encouragement, and tools to, get from almost being at home all the time to coming back into a normal world where they see people every day.
Got you. So, and Claire, what was EAP again? What does that stand for?
EAP stands for it's an employee assistance program.
Employee assistance program. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you. Super. So next question is then, I'm sure some of the employees will be quite keen to continue working from home. So how does a business stand with bringing those people back, saying, right, I need to get people back to work. I want my workers back in the office, back where I can see them. How are we gonna what are your tips on that, really? That's one of the things that cropped up, really, because I think people have thought, oh, I don't need to drive in my car, I don't need to pay money for sandwiches, I can have a little whatever, I can watch Neighbours or Loose Women or whatever you want to be watching in at lunchtime, and then do whatever you like whenever you like, really. So how do I overcome that one, Claire?
This has at the moment been probably the biggest talking point, I would say, across industry sector, people that I deal with on a day-to-day basis. And what I would say to you all as business owners, you are quite within your rights to ask your employees to come back to work. That's what has been, providing your documents are correct, that's what's contractually been agreed. But you've got to look at everyone's individual cases and individual needs. There will be some people that will be very comfortable at home and want to have flexible working. When you're dealing with flexible working requests, That could be anything from, I stay up and watch the NFL on Sunday evenings and I'm not going to be able to be at work for 9 o'clock. I put in a request for flexible working to start work at 12. People can put requests in all the time for things like that. It's how you as a business handle that request. So I definitely think that the landscape has changed. I definitely think that there's going to be a lot more businesses adopting a more hybrid model. But if someone to consistently work from home, you've got to just assess that individually. There'll be some businesses, if you think about manufacturing businesses and construction businesses, it's not going to be practical for those employees to work at home if they're needed to operate machinery or be in different places every day. So what you have to really do with this is look at it case by case for sure. But if you want them back in the workplace, what you have to have as a business is a strong business case as to why. Because it's not okay just to reject it without knowing why. Because employees in the last year or so, thanks to some great media outlets that I shall not name, but been some great media outlets there that are sharing content of know your rights for this and know your rights for that. So what you have to, and so because they now know what, or they think they know what they're entitled to, you now need to be one step ahead as a business owner. You are absolutely within your rights to reject any request for people to stay working at home or flexible working. But what you have to make sure that you've got is a very strong, almost watertight business case as to why that's not possible. Because if challenged by an employee, and we got as far as an ACAS conciliation and we got as far as an employment tribunal, that's the only way you're going to be able to defend your reason. So how do you put a business case together? Probably not the most straightforward thing to do, but you've just got to look inwardly at your business and outwardly at your business. Is it practical to have these people at home? Are we more productive in the workplace, and why? And someone like Steve, I know, is pretty good at helping with things like this. So if a business is struggling with that, that's when you would go to someone like Steve for some guidance and assistance to help you put that business case together in the first instance. But it's all to do with a business case. And the reason that it is to do with a business case is because the end result of worst case scenario, you are at a tribunal because that employee thinks that you've wronged them. You then got to come off the back foot so that you're able to defend that pretty much.
I think it's interesting point you raised there, really, because I think, and it is, you mentioned the age case, really, and it's interesting that sort of 50 plus people really are in a mind of, well, I've got to be seen to be working, and I'm in the office before the boss. I'm here, boss, I'm here. And then at the end of the day, oh yeah, you're off, boss, I'm still here, I'm still here. And it was very much that time, people were measured on the time you're actually in work, which is kind of counterproductive, really, because you really want the outcome to be, what is the outcome? What have you been doing during that period of time? Someone might have done this amount of time, but has been far more productive than someone who sat in the office looking at Facebook or whatever on their computer, but they're there. And so it's quite an interesting situation, really, where you kind of think, well, actually, for a generation, it's like, well, yeah, you need to be there, you need to be seen to be working hard. It's that working hard as an ethic there, and hard usually means long, where actually in my world of sort of business coaching, we want people to work smarter and work less. It's almost like, well, yeah, it's not a badge of honor that you've had to go in at 7 o'clock and carry on working till 1 o'clock in the morning. Well, you think you probably can't cope. You need to do something else. You need to bring some in. You need more people to bring into the business to help you on that, really. So,
and I do think, though, that a lot of business owners' mindset has changed because of this, because we've been forced to have remote work. And I think a lot of the time, no, that can't happen in my business, we can't function. Well, actually, it was sink or swim. And a lot of business owners, where their mindset might have been, no, this isn't going to work for me, now very much, okay, it has worked. How do I now manage it going forward? And the technology around us now is great. Microsoft Teams is working great. This works great. Are we able to be productive? Are we more bothered about the method or the result? But the overriding message from me here is, if you want to say no, you're within your rights to call them back into the workplace if that's what you're doing. You've just got to make sure your business case matches your desire to have them back in the workplace.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it, really? So yeah, cool. Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much for that, Claire. Thanks. Let's move on to the next question. So number 4 would be, do your employees want it's kind of what we've talked on there, really. So do they want a sort of flexible hybrid model, mixing days at home and days at the office? I know when we met on Monday, we said about that. I think I heard about Mace big construction company. I don't know whether you've heard. Do you know Mace, Maria? Have you heard of Mace? Yeah, so they're a big guys. They've got about 10,000 employees, and they were going to get it written into their contract that you could work 2 days at home and 3 days in the office. That was going to be written into their. I believe that's that. If I heard it right, first thing in the morning, that they were definitely looking to do that sort of two and three sort of scenario, really, and make it there. So, what are your thoughts on that, Claire? How could you offer any advice?
Yeah, I would say that contract law is contract law. Whatever you write in that contract, you have got to stick to without prejudice and consistently. So you as a business owner have to give yourself options. I absolutely would be not writing into any type of employment contracts anything fixed. Personally, best practice. Give yourself options. Yeah. Firstly, could this work in your business is the first question you've got to answer, right? Business case again. Is a half and half mixed, some remote, some in the office, some hybrid? Because again, your business, if you run a print manufacturing business, and I just use that one example because I've got a client that's like that, well, their print minder's never going to be able to have a remote working because they need to be in the business. But could the admin team that are dealing with credit control, could they? Yeah, they could. So you've just got to analyse your business and who's in it, and make that and build that business case around what people do. Firstly, I definitely wouldn't recommend writing in unless you know it's never ever going to change.
Yes.
You can work 2 days at home and 3 days in the office, because when you want to make changes to someone's employment contract, they can refuse to sign and accept it, particularly if you're making a change to their terms and conditions that they think is detrimental to them. So you've got to word it correctly. What I see a lot in my day job with contracts is stuff that is written that isn't future proofing a business and could cause them issues should they want to make some changes. Precedent is something that we talk about a lot in employment law. If you haven't got a policy around a certain area, we would revert to statutory law. That's how it works when it goes to tribunal. The only thing that's ever going to trump statutory law is any precedents that you've set in your business. So what you need to have is control. Yes, we have a hybrid model, flexible working, and detail how they would apply for it, how they would access it, how they would make that applicable to them. But I would not be inclined to write that into an employment contract.
Got you. Well, that's a really good point, actually. And if you're thinking of future proofing things, how would it be?
So
how would it be? Sorry, it's a bit of a delay on the line. Say that again.
I was just going to say, unfortunately, quite a lot of the smaller businesses out there feel that they need to throw everything into the employment contract and stipulate everything in there. Makes it really hard to make changes. Your contract needs to be the basics. Then your employee handbook, which most businesses should have, would be able to cover off things like this, your remote working, your hybrid model, things like that. But firstly, could it work? And then how do we make that happen? But I would avoid black and white writing unless it's ever going to change.
Claire, can I ask a question?
Hello.
I can ask a question.
Of course.
Yeah. So if you've got your fixed or your contract, could you not just put a terms of reference with that was that would fit the profile of that job that was attached to the contract?
You absolutely can detail the contracts to fit the job requirements for sure. But I always say to people, just tread very carefully when you're expressing how people are working, if it's not a permanent remote job, a permanent field-based job, a permanent office-based job, because regardless of what they do, if you ever want to make changes to that, that individual doesn't have to agree.
Yeah.
So any, you know, if we take the furlough process, for example, let's go all the way back to March last year, right? Every single business owner that put their staff on furlough was in breach of contract because it didn't exist. So what they had to do, because it was a temporary change to terms and conditions, they had to agree a letter. So everyone that was furloughed got a letter saying, you're going to be placed on furlough, blah, 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 blah. That was acknowledged, signed and accepted by the employee. That protected the employer to make that temporary change so they weren't in breach of contract.
Yeah.
What happened was if someone said you're on furlough until the 30th of May and didn't reissue that letter on the 1st of June, they were in breach of contract from the 1st of June onwards. Any changes to the normal structure that you don't have documented and agreed is a breach of contract. My message to people always is, where it comes to what we're going through right now with hybrid, mixing days, home office, any changes to the norm, be very, very aware of it. That's my contract. You've said I'm allowed to work 3 days a week in the office and 2 days at home. I'm not changing back to a 5-day in the office week, because if your business needs them to be more in the office at a later date, but you've stipulated in their original contract that that's not what they do, they don't have to agree to it. They don't have to, because
True.
a reissue of a contract has to be signed and accepted by the employee. So your handbook gives you flexibility, gives you options, because you may do it, you may not. It could happen, it could not. And it gives you the flexibility to exercise it as an owner, business owner or not. But your basic contract, you need to keep it simple, so it covers off what legally is required in it. And I think that we're going to see, as time goes on, an awful lot around working times, where they work and how that, I think we're going to see a lot of changes with that coming.
Thanks for that.
Lovely, thanks. Great question, Wayne. Just one thing I was thinking in my mind, Claire, was along that contract was, I can remember signing, reading contracts, and it says your job role is blah 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 blah, and anything else dependent on the needs of the business. Do people still write that into their contracts?
So there was a really big legislation change on the 6th of April last year called the Good Work Plan. Some of you may or may not be familiar with that. That brought, if I was to say to you that was an employment law change of a generation, it rendered every employment contract pretty much invalid overnight. Under the Good Work Plan, it was actually a review commissioned by Theresa May when she was in power. Under the Taylor Review, it was looking at all types of working conditions. As part of that, you had to be a lot more specific in contracts around what job descriptions entailed. Yes, you can still use that line, any other task outlined by your line manager or whatever. But the Good Work Plan has made it a lot stricter on actually stipulating what people's job titles are and what their responsibilities are. And that's the Good Work Plan, if anyone's not familiar with it.
Okay, cool. Lovely. Thanks for that. Brilliant. Now let's move on to question 5. Thanks, Claire. Health and safety implications of returning to work.
Yeah.
Most people's favourite subject, not health and safety.
So health and safety is that thing, isn't it? It's, I've never had an accident. Well, if someone's cut their finger, they have. So your 5 steps to being COVID secure. If you've got premises, there's a poster. Hopefully you're familiar with it, but the poster is actually on version 3 of this. But your 5 steps to being COVID secure is absolutely still UK requirement by law. Should be displayed somewhere visibly public within your workplace. If a health and safety inspector turns up for a random little look at what you're doing, they would expect to see that displayed. Anyone hasn't got one, let me know. I'm happy to send you one after. Your 5 steps to being COVID secure poster is displayed. You then put a COVID policy together based on the 5 steps to being COVID secure, which is all to do with your social distancing, your masks, your hand washing, all of that, all the stuff that we are doing that we know. You put your policy together and then you get your risk assessment together. What's very interesting is businesses that have got public liability insurance, a lot of them being asked to provide the evidence of the COVID policy and the risk assessments to satisfy public liability insurance requirements as well. The spot checking, oh yes, the spot checking. So the HSE have a lot more visibility in the local area now. They're a lot more on the ground, and they are doing a lot more spot checks. It's not so much they're spot checking like retail outlets. They're going around business parks, they're going into serviced offices, and they genuinely are, you know, as much as they provide an amazing service and they're super important to the health, you know, the well-being of the workplace, they are a self-funding organisation. I've got quite a few clients based over in Luton. I think I've got 9 clients based in Luton, and Luton was a spot check last year for a 2-week period. And if you'd have said to me, one of my clients had a spot check, I'd have gone, no, Luton's massive. My 9 clients aren't getting spot checked. But actually, 2 of my clients got a spot check. Tick the box is fine because, you know, the documentation was there and they were happy. But they are a lot more on the ground, and you do need to be very aware of them. At the best case scenario, they're going to love what you've done. They're going to see that you're compliant. Worst case scenario, prohibition notice, inspection, closure. But it's really important, and it's really important I get this message across, that just having your COVID documentation does not mean that they would be giving you a big tick in the health and safety world. Things like your first aid policy, which every business should have in their health and safety policy statement, from last year should have been upgraded. Most simplest one I can describe to you is the first aid policy. When COVID happened, how you administer mouth-to-mouth changed. If your documentation doesn't show that, that's not compliant. They're not going to pat you on the back because you've talked about it in your COVID policy. That's completely separate. They're going to want to look at all of your other health and safety documentation and think, okay, have we put a pair of COVID glasses on, and have we taken into account the effect that COVID could have on this particular area? I cannot stress enough the importance of the compliant documentation, right? It is the only, I say this in tongue in cheek across the board, not just with COVID, the documentation is the only thing that will keep you out of prison if you're prosecuted. Fact. Health and safety law currently in the UK, if you employ under 5 members of staff, you don't have to have everything documented by law. Still prosecuted in the same way for breach of health and safety. Above 5, you have to. But the documentation is what gets you out of jail, literally. When you're prosecuted under health and safety breach, it is a reverse burden of proof. So you are guilty until you can prove you're innocent. And the only way you can do that is not by saying, well, I did it. It's how you evidence that. And that's made up of documentation, up-to-date risk assessments, competency training. So you just need to be very, very aware of when people are coming back into the workplace now, have they been adequately trained to operate in what your new space looks like? That's the first thing. But just be aware that the spot checks are happening, and they're happening to the most unlikely of businesses out there, honestly. So just bear that in mind.
Brilliant, lovely, thank you. Thanks, Claire. Next question is number 6. Do you have the correct, or it's probably more of a how about social media, really? How can you mitigate against negative activity? I think social media, you know, that whether that's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever you want to be using, really. Yeah.
So everyone's brand's important to them, right? Fact. Your business is your baby. It's your passion. It's what you do. Unfortunately, social media is a very personal outlet for people, and there are an awful lot of Facebook community groups, community hubs, even Facebook groups for streets, WhatsApp groups, things like that. If you don't have a social media policy in your business, you need one, absolutely, because you need to give your employees very, very clear guidelines on how they behave online if it's a representation of your business. I have seen, and I have had calls from members of the public. I've had friends sending me screenshots of companies that are being completely and utterly destroyed by employees that are a bit hacked off with how they've been treated. my business isn't COVID secure. My boss has asked me to do this. I'm on furlough and they've asked me to work, and they are naming these companies in public. You have the absolute right to protect your business in the best possible way that you can. And the only way you can do that in this free world of social media is to have very clear guidelines of what you're expected of your employees whilst they work for you. Vicarious liability is something that we talk about a lot. Even when they're not on your time, they're still your problem. So I would honestly say that if you haven't got a handbook, or you have got one and you've not got a social media policy in it, you need to start looking at that. You are okay to say, when you finish work, please don't wear your company uniform and be photographed on social media. Let me give you a case in point example. My husband is a secondary school teacher in Hertfordshire, and he's a massive football fan. And he goes to watch a football match, and he could wear his school PE coat that he's got, completely innocent, football fan, loves it, not really well respected member of the local community, respected member of the faculty in, in the school he's in. He is on social media because he's accidentally in a photograph of something that's gone wrong at a football match. The school's logo is now associated with that. That's your business. So it's really, really important that you identify the risks associated to your brand and how you expect your employees to behave online. Sure, you can't stop people moaning about certain things, but I can tell you now that on my work phone, I've got copies of documentation from people that have sent stuff to me that companies have issued that aren't compliant and have made employees' lives quite uncomfortable. And I know these companies' names now. Yeah. Because they've gone on and they've publicly vilified them. So it's so important that you have control over this. You're never going to stop everything, but that social imprint doesn't go away. If you search the Facebook group and you look for your company name, it never goes away. So it's so important that you've got the right social media policy in to protect your company, but also to protect your employees as well, because who wants to have a difficult conversation with an employee over that?
Yeah.
You know?
Claire,
yeah.
You ask another question. So within that, would you put something in there like a NDA, non-disclosure agreement?
If you felt that it was right for your business, you can put an NDA in, absolutely, and some businesses do. But I mean, respectfully, I work for I work for the oldest, most established HR and health and safety consultancy in the country, and we have a social media policy that's quite, it talks about what we can and what we can't do, and just outlines the company expectations. That's all you're doing, is outlining company expectations of what's expected of you.
Yeah.
If you want to go as far as an NDA, then of course you can. That's your right to do so. But a good, well-written social media policy by someone that knows what they're doing with it will suffice. And then you just deal with, if something happens on a case-by-case basis with the individuals. But what things you do consider in that is, like I just said, company uniform. Do you want them online socially in your company uniform? Do you want that? Do you not? Because honestly, my husband could go and watch a football match in the stands, absolutely fine. All hell breaks loose, 3 rows in front of him, photos. And he's not done nothing wrong, but it's that association of your brand with that. So you have to also consider as well, where do your staff, where do they hang out? Do they hang out on Facebook? Do they hang out on Instagram? Are they professionally using it for LinkedIn? Because you'd want to encourage them to professionally use it for LinkedIn or for Facebook. So it's just also understanding where they are and what you've got to put in place to protect everyone. But this is something that, again, is a very big talking point because of the rise of social media and all the different platforms that there are now. If you ignore it, it can be detrimental to you. So I would strongly recommend that, particularly in the last year, and some of the things I've seen written about businesses that are named is quite upsetting, I think, if that was my business.
Yeah, definitely. I think also on I'm aware of a company with WhatsApp. Companies use WhatsApp, the WhatsApp group within the company. When some of the people got put onto furlough, they felt a bit dejected. It wasn't managed well enough, I don't think, when they went onto furlough. and they created their own WhatsApp group and excluded everybody else. So you had the COVID WhatsApp group, the working from home WhatsApp group, and the working in place WhatsApp group, and they were like three tribes sort of sniping at each other. It was crazy. But also, then they've got to come back from COVID back in, then reintegrate them. You can't, like you say, it's there forever. You can't just wipe the slate clean and go, "Oh, I'm sorry what I said. I didn't mean it at the time. I was just angry." But we've said it. It's said.
Yep. And it is communication and management of how that's dealt with. I've been on furlough. Regular touch points with them is crucial. You know, they're still part of the team, although they're just temporarily not doing what they usually would do. But the social media thing is quite big. It's powerful. Things get shared. Things go viral. You know, you work hard to build your client base. You work hard to provide good services, and you know, and you've got your passion, your belief, and you do it for all those reasons. And all it takes is one comment taken the wrong way by somebody, shared 1,000 times. Does that have an impact on your bottom line? So the social media policy is very, very, very important in today's world.
Brilliant. Okay, brilliant, lovely. Thanks. Good question again, Wayne. Last question then is number 7. Really, it's kind of more of a, I suppose, observation, really, more than anything, isn't it? As how well do you know your employees, really? Do you know what they're thinking? And often with my clients, it's going to be, well, who is keen to come back? You know, who's chomping at the bit to get back to work, or who's perhaps a bit more reluctant, who wants to stay at home and do work from home. So any sort of tips on that, really? I know you probably, yeah, I'll put one up there, Claire, for you. Communication is going to be a key one, I would imagine.
It is communication. It is taking advantage of the tools that you've got that allow you to still be in contact with each other. And that doesn't just have to include the working workforce. If people have still got people on furlough, how included are they? Are you having one-to-ones with your employees and finding out how they are? You know, it's all about the communication, because you can have a phone call with somebody and someone can sound great. You can jump onto a video conference with somebody and it may just not look like their usual self. You know, although it's kind of faceless, you still know your staff, you still know your colleagues. So it's really important to communicate with them effectively. How's the family? If someone's had COVID, were they looking after a vulnerable relative that had to shield? It's just knowing what's going on in that picture so that you can deal with what their objections are or what their concerns might be when they want to return to the workplace. So the communication is key right now. Fact. Individual one-to-ones, but how are your phone calls? You know, how many of you have had staff that you might not have seen for a while or might have been on furlough? Have you picked them up? Have you picked up the phone and said, how are you? Has anyone done that? You know, it a quick 5-minute call, it would be appreciated for sure. And your staff that have been on furlough, if you've got people that have been furloughed for quite a period of time, or you know people that have been furloughed for a period of time, are they invited to team meetings? Just because you're in furlough doesn't mean you can't attend a team meeting. How well do they know what's going on in the workplace while they've been temporarily out of it?
Good point. Good point. So that'll keep that inclusion, won't it, really, and make it that much easier for when they come back as well. If they're suddenly coming back and it's like, oh, I didn't know that, or didn't know that, or didn't know anything. It's like, well, yeah, what keep them in, keep that engagement, really, isn't it? That got that engagement and sort of almost daily huddle. I know Action Coach recommended early when the pandemic first broke out. It said they were saying ring all your clients every day. And it's like, oh, right, okay, I'm not quite sure. How are you today? How are you today? How are you today? It was that perhaps it was a bit over the top, maybe, but certainly it was every week without fail, if not every couple of days. Really, it was going to be putting calls in to see how people are really. So I know we've kind of something I sort of came up with really was this. Or thought would share really was having maybe have a little questionnaire that you could use and come up with some little questions really of how do you feel about returning to the office or stroke seeing others return to the office. How do you feel about that? And whether you could put 1 to 10, 10 being really anxious, 1 being not anxious. Where are you on that sort of scale? The question B there would be, perhaps could be, what have you liked best about your working arrangements over the lockdown period? So what do you think's worked really well? And that's a good way of getting some positive feedback. Well, I enjoyed this, or I enjoyed that. Was that something that you can incorporate in the workplace going forward? And then the third area, really, so it's keeping it really quite short and sharp and to the point, really. So what can we do to ensure that your return is as productive as possible? So that's kind of a slightly more negative, in as much as what have we been doing badly, perhaps? How could we help better, or help you better, to get you back into the workplace and get you going again, really? So it's quite maybe think about a questionnaire, or get some feedback. And I think the key thing is, don't make it too long, really. Two or three questions is going to be plenty. I think when we all buy things, we're used to getting feedback requests, and the longer they are, certainly it means that the less likely they are to get answered. If it's how do you rate our service out of 10, 1 out of 10, you're probably going to reply to that. If it's a 4-page essay, you're probably not going to reply to that. But certainly in my experience anyway. So that might be that might be something to put out there, a little bit of a return to work questionnaire. But you need to be quick, really, if you're going to be bringing people back for the 19th of July, which I know some are and some aren't. Some are going to sit on it and actually see what happens, really. So I think has anyone got any more questions? Is there any? I know there are sort of 7 questions that we kind of came up with. I know they weren't the definitive, and Wayne's put some really good questions to you, Claire, today. Anyone else got any other questions they want to sort of, you can either pop it in the chat box or ask openly. I'll leave anyone feeling ready for any questions, anything they want to.
I'm up for another question if I'm okay. I don't. I might do.
No problem, mate. Sorry.
One of the things that I've been working on returning to work, it's like a safeguarding solution, and one of the things that I looked at was doing an employee and employer charter. So basically, what the employer expects of the employee to do to make sure they're safe and the safeguarding of their fellow employees, and also what the employer will do to ensure that the workplace is safe and clean. So I think a few of the people that I've spoken to, they were just worried about the resurgence of COVID and things like that. So if you've got everybody working to the same guidelines and signing up for it, I mean, a wet signature that says, I agree to this charter on both sides, they've got more confidence in thinking, well, the company's now giving me this, I have to step up to meet the requirements for the company and my fellow workers.
Yeah, great. Yeah, really good. I like that idea a lot. I mean, it's something, in fact, so it springs to mind when we are bringing on working with new clients to start with. It's almost like what I expect from you and what you can expect from me kind of scenario, isn't it? So I really like that, Wayne. It sounds a really good idea to outline, and you can say, well, look, this is what we expect. It will relieve any sort of perhaps anxiety, as long as it's not, it's a simple document that people can look at and use. Really, I think that would be a great idea. So that's a kind of like a charter, yeah.
Yeah, and if both people sign up to it, both go to the commitment that follow through, and they're the things that you can then look at, and then you can do, if you've got facilities managers or whoever, can then go around and just check that everybody's abiding to the right. I'm not saying go around marshalling things, but just having a gentle conversation, just say, look, you signed up for this thing. We need everybody to follow the guidelines, because if there is a resurgence of it, we want to be able to manage it, not having to shut the office down for 2 weeks or whatever. So I put something together around that, and also on the wellbeing side, you were talking about before, Claire. But one of the things I looked at was people were going on about well-being, and it was like you go on LinkedIn, everybody's got the link, you know, the great sayings and get Britain talking. And but what they should be doing is getting people listening, not talking. You know, you've got to have the right balance. But also, it's welfare that affects well-being. So well-being is a symptom from welfare.
Yep.
So there's certain things, certain lines you can't cross, obviously. But if you've got financial issues or problems like that, somebody saying they're there, it'll get better, won't help their well-being. The only thing that will help the well-being in that point is dealing with the core problem.
And I think that you find, because employee assistance programs don't just deal with mental health problems. A good employee assistance program will offer guidance, support and counselling for bereavement, relationship breakdown, addiction, gambling, debt, mental health. So that really, if someone is struggling with those things and they're aware that that service is there, they may well trigger that, get help for the problem that will then allow them to perform better in the workplace. And what you've got to also take into consideration is the stress management from a health, and it's a bit of an odd one, this, but stress management policy really factors into health and safety documentation, because it's whether that's work-related stress or personal-related stress. What are the issues that they've got? Does that then mean that they can't do their normal job? Do we need to make reasonable adjustments? What do we need to do to support that individual? Can they work as part of a team? But a lot of people keep things very much close to their chest. So actually having a tool available that people can use, they don't have to use it, but it's, as a business, to be able to offer something like that in this world today right now is powerful. You know, I've never seen in the last 12 months an uptake on employee assistance programs like I'd seen prior to that. So I would say to you that if that is a concern for you, do a little bit of, give me a call after. I can talk you through where to look at that, because
that'd be brilliant, because it's all part of the duty of care thing, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah, definitely. People think a bit wishy-washy maybe sometimes, but actually I've got access to our employee assistance program. I've never triggered the counselling, but I absolutely love some of the content that's inside the app. I love the ability to sort of do some team challenges on steps, because we've all been at home. So it is so much more than just that, and very much underutilised tool, I think, in the workplace.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Claire.
Super, lovely. I think that that we are. I've seen messages coming in really, so I'll just go to one that we're sort of running away with time. What we're going to do really, we've got the recording, so we'll save the recording, and I'll also send we'll do a PDF version of the slides, and I'll make sure that you get a copy of the slides. So Wahid, so we've got the recording, and we'll send out the slides so you can prompt it. Any questions that you want to ask Claire in any more detail, she's really happy to answer those. It's been fantastic, super knowledgeable, Claire. Thank you very much for doing this. Hope you've enjoyed it. So you'll get the slides. I'll make it access to the recording, so everything's there for you. Thanks very much for coming along this afternoon. Thanks for your participation. It's been really good, and stay safe. And so we'll see what happens in the future, really. So stay safe, be prepared for things to change, because guess what? They always do, and they always will, and they always have. So bye for now.
Yeah. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Oh. Stop recording.
Yes.